In the dim haze of dawn, the Bangkok Metropolitan Police received a report of an abandoned car on the outskirts of the city. Inside, they found the lifeless body of a woman, her lips tinged with an unnatural blue. The coroner's report confirmed cyanide poisoning. This was the third such case in 6 months, each linked by a chilling thread. The victims had been acquaintances of a reclusive woman known only as Anya. Anya had lived a quiet life, her presence barely noticed in her suburban neighborhood. Yet her connections to the deceased raised suspicions. The first victim, a coworker, had mysteriously died after sharing a meal with her. The second, a distant cousin, was last seen visiting her home. And now, the third victim, a former friend, had been discovered dead mere days after meeting her. As investigators delved deeper, a disturbing pattern emerged. Anya's victims were all women she knew intimately, each of whom had lent her money shortly before their deaths. The amounts were not exorbitant, but they painted a picture of calculated exploitation. Police uncovered messages from Anya to her victims, filled with reassurances and promises of repayment. The last messages were eerily identical, all sent hours before the victims' deaths. "Thank you for trusting me." Surveillance footage became the turning point. Cameras near the abandoned car captured a figure matching Anya's description, walking away in the early hours. Her meticulous attempts to avoid detection, mask, gloves, and deliberate avoidance of main roads only heightened suspicion. Investigators placed her under covert surveillance, hoping to catch her in the act. For months, Anya lived a life of apparent normalcy, working part-time at a local market and volunteering at a community center. But the facade cracked when police tracked her purchase of cyanide from a chemical supplier. The transaction was recorded under a fake name, but the handwriting matched samples from her workplace. The net tightened as investigators pieced together her movements, linking her to 7 more deaths across multiple provinces. Her next move revealed a glimpse of her psyche. Anya began to grow restless under surveillance, changing her routines and making cryptic statements to colleagues about moving away or starting fresh. It was clear she sensed the tightening noose, and officers had to act quickly. Anya's arrest was meticulously planned. A plainclothes officer approached her at the market, asking routine questions. As soon as she showed signs of nervousness, a team moved in. She was detained without incident, her expression blank as she was handcuffed. Inside her home, officers found vials of cyanide hidden in kitchen cabinets and a notebook containing names, dates, and cryptic symbols, a potential ledger of her crimes. Investigators uncovered a chilling scene in her basement, a makeshift lab where traces of cyanide and other toxic chemicals were found. Diaries revealed her thoughts over the years. Cryptic entries such as "trust is the easiest weapon" and "money flows when the heart stops." Each discovery added a new layer of horror. The trial was a media spectacle, drawing crowds from across the nation. Prosecutors presented a chilling case. Anya had systematically targeted women she perceived as vulnerable, gaining their trust before poisoning them. Witnesses testified to her manipulative charm, describing her as quietly persuasive and impossible to say no to. The defense argued lack of concrete evidence, claiming the cyanide could have been planted, but the forensic analysis was damning. Residue from the poison was found on items in her possession, and the handwriting in the ledger was conclusively hers. During cross-examination, a chilling detail emerged. Anya had once worked in a pharmaceutical company where she had learned about toxins. This employment had ended years ago, but it provided her the knowledge to execute her plans. The revelation added another layer to her methodical nature. Anya's demeanor in court was unnerving. She showed no remorse, maintaining a stoic expression throughout. Her only words were a flat denial of the charges. "I didn't do it." But as testimonies piled up, her mask began to slip. A former friend recounted a harrowing escape after confronting Anya about missing money, describing how she'd felt a sudden dizziness after drinking tea at her home. A chilling silence filled the courtroom as the witness described her narrow escape. The turning point came when international connections surfaced. Interpol revealed that Anya had traveled extensively in the years prior, with unsolved cases of cyanide poisoning reported in Malaysia and Cambodia. A joint task force uncovered strikingly similar patterns, leading to her indictment for 5 additional murders abroad. The coordinated effort to extradite her for these crimes underscored the global scope of her actions. The manhunt in Cambodia had its own dramatic narrative. Witnesses recalled a mysterious woman who befriended tourists, often offering local teas or food. The connection was only made after Anya's arrest, but the stories revealed the depth of her manipulation and predation. Anya's life unraveled further as forensic psychologists painted a grim portrait of a methodical killer. They described her as calculating and devoid of empathy, driven by financial desperation and a twisted sense of superiority. Her victims, they argued, were pawns in her quest for control. Each death meticulously planned to eliminate debt and silence suspicion. The trial's conclusion was swift. Anya was convicted of 15 murders in Thailand, with additional charges pending internationally. The judge condemned her actions as a betrayal of human trust, sentencing her to death. As the verdict was read, Anya's composure faltered for the first time. Her hands trembled, but her face remained expressionless. In the aftermath, authorities faced the daunting task of unraveling the full extent of her crimes. Cold cases were reopened across Southeast Asia, with families seeking closure for loved ones lost under mysterious circumstances. Anya's notebook became a grim roadmap, its cryptic symbols slowly decoded to reveal a chilling legacy of death. The community that once knew her as a quiet neighbor grappled with the horror of her actions. Her home, once a bustling hub of activity, stood abandoned, a grim reminder of the lives lost. The cyanide killer's reign of terror had ended, but the scars she left behind would take years to heal. From her prison cell, Anya remained an enigma. She refused interviews, her silence a final act of defiance. Psychologists speculated about her motives, but the truth lay buried in the minds of her victims, silenced forever. But prison life took its toll in more ways than one. Anya's stoic demeanor began to crack as weeks turned into months. Fellow inmates whispered of her erratic behavior, talking to herself in the dead of night, pacing her cell endlessly, and scrawling unintelligible symbols on the walls with whatever materials she could find. Her notoriety made her a target. Guards reported several altercations, including an incident where another inmate attempted to attack her with a sharpened toothbrush. Anya, in a rare show of emotion, fought back with a feral intensity that left the attacker hospitalized. This led to her isolation, a small, windowless cell where the only sounds were the distant echoes of others and the slow, steady drip of a leaking pipe. Psychologists assigned to monitor her mental state noted her descent into paranoia. She claimed the spirits of her victims visited her at night, their blue-tinged faces staring through the darkness. She refused meals for days, muttering about poison, irony not lost on the prison staff. When she did speak, it was to accuse guards of tampering with her food or conspiring against her. Her cell became a shrine to her delusions. Scraps of paper from old books were turned into makeshift talismans, arranged in patterns she claimed warded off the dead. The once pristine walls were now covered in erratic scribbles, blending diary-like confessions with cryptic symbols that mirrored those in her infamous notebook. Despite her isolation, rumors of her influence spread through the prison. Some inmates believed she possessed supernatural abilities, while others feared her enough to avoid even uttering her name. One guard recounted finding a small pile of dead rats outside her cell, their deaths unexplained but eerily coincidental. Her health deteriorated rapidly. The woman who once manipulated and charmed her way into victims' trust now appeared frail, her skin pale and her eyes sunken. Prison doctors diagnosed her with severe malnutrition and sleep deprivation. Though Anya refused treatment, claiming it was part of a greater plan she couldn't explain. In her final days, Anya's paranoia reached its peak. She screamed through the night, begging unseen figures for mercy. Guards found her curled in the corner of her cell, clawing at her own skin as if trying to remove something unseen. Her death, when it came, was both sudden and shrouded in mystery. Official reports listed a heart attack, but whispers among staff and inmates told of a more supernatural end, a reckoning for her countless sins. Years later, her story remains a grim cautionary tale, not just of the horrors she inflicted, but of the toll such darkness takes, even on its perpetrator. Documentaries and books dissect her life and death, each adding layers to the legend of the cyanide killer. In death, as in life, Anya left behind more questions than answers, her legacy forever etched in the annals of true crime.